Given that I had tons of fun making my last Resident Evil challenge video, I thought that I would like to make another one in that style. And what better game to choose than one of my all-time favourites, the Resident Evil 2 remake? And what would be the best way to relive some of my most cherished moments of gaming? By putting myself through even more pain and suffering. Yes, that's right, I'm here today attempting to answer the question, can you beat the Resident Evil 2 remake using nothing but a knife? The rules are as followed. The only tool that I can use throughout this playthrough is the knife. Under no circumstances can I use any other kind of weaponry. This also includes the flash grenade, as it may not cause any damage, but it may still provide an advantage that I would not have if I was doing the game knife only. And finally, the infinite knife unlockable is banned, as it seems that I'm a masochist and I don't really like to make things easier for myself. And without further ado, let's get this train rolling. Upon starting this run, I was faced with this rather grotesquely animated old chap who seemed that he was doing his own truck-only run, as not even a minute into the game, he'd already bagged his first victim. Doing better than me already. I'll be doing this run as Claire, who's come to Raccoon City in search of her brother after he went out to find a suitable man to continue the Redfield lineage. Not a moment had passed before I ran into this zombie who was very intent on making some chili con carne out of this officer's neck, and unable to find him without a knife, I swiftly ran past him and grabbed the key. Upon leaving the store, I ran into Captain Jawline himself and... Wait, can it be? Finally, a worthy candidate for Claire! Yet, the triumph was short-lived, as they quickly became overrun by zombies, and without a knife in hand, Leon and Claire made a daring escape to the city. Once we had arrived, it seemed that the chap who was doing the truck percent run had arrived to claim us as his two last victims, and after a quick cutscene which was definitely directed by Michael Bay, Leon and I were separated. I began the usual run through the streets and eventually ended up at the police station. I put away all my guns and ammo and then headed down to the east corridor. I witnessed another poor lad getting murdered and I was able to escape the confrontation without taking a single hit. I was then saved by the Chad Marvin, who bestowed upon me the greatest honour of them all, a knife. Now, one thing that's worth noting is that the knives in the RE2 remake differ greatly from other knives throughout the franchise. You see, the knives in this game are considered sub-weapons and have a set durability, meaning that they will eventually run out, and there are only scarce few throughout the game, meaning that I must be very conservative as I play. And after some epic parkour, I successfully reached the first save room. I headed upstairs and was able to solve the first lock puzzle, which gave me a spare part which I could use to gain another knife later on. I caught a glimpse of one of the Licky boys and then I returned to Marvin, who informed me that Leon had actually made it to the police station alive. And people still think that Ethan's the one. I grabbed the lion medallion and was able to receive my second knife. I grabbed the horse's medallion and in the heat of the panic moment I accidentally used one of my knives. Using the spare part I had got earlier, I was able to put in one of the missing keys from the keypad and bag myself a third knife. I went to go visit Leon, but not before a helicopter rudely decided to crash into the side of the building. Upon meeting him, the pilot of the helicopter was so overjoyed that Claire had finally found somebody to continue the Redfield lineage that he decided to spontaneously combust. Once again splitting up, I was able to grab the RE7 bolt cutters and make a daring dash to the main hall. Once again, my 3 brain cells decided not to work together and I ended up losing my second knife. This run was a shambles. I put the valve in place, and having a close call with the liquor, I was able to successfully get to the Star's office, allowing me to receive the battery. I swear that there must be something wrong with me, as during my trek down the corridor of doom, I used my third and final knife. It seems the hardest part about this run is trying not to give in to your muscle memory. Despite knowing that the run was practically hopeless at this point, I grabbed the detonator and using the battery, I was able to get the third and final medallion. Going into the G1 fight, I felt that my hopes had flew into the Bermuda Triangle as they were absolutely nowhere to be seen. Yet, having the slightest slimmer of hope, I thought that maybe there could be a knife within the battle arena, and so I thought best to just try out the fight and see if I could pull through. And behold my luck, there were no knives within the arena. This run was dead.
I'm fucking dead, dude. I'm fucking dead, dude. I'm fucking, yeah. It's just nothing I...
Having to start again, I have redid the entirety of the police station section and ensured that I had 3 knives available for the Birkin fight. Now, I did not actually know this, but depending on how high your frame rate is, the damage of your knife will actually increase, and so I found this fight to be extremely easy. And no word of a lie, the fight was over on standard mode in less than a minute. Now who would win? Some biologically advanced bioweapon developed by one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world, or one British boy with a knife? And I think we finally found the answer. I then had a rather rude introduction from Chief FE.
It's funny because his name is Chief Irons.
and after watching a child get kidnapped, I began the underground police station section. I made a quick trip down to Liquor Town, and then I was able to grab the diamond key without much struggle. I pulled the switch and then took the elevator back up to the police station. I made a quick stop at the box and it was time for the rooftops, although not before bagging the large cog and another knife for my collection. I seized the first electronic part and then began my trek up to the helicopter crash site. Upon putting out the fire, it became very clear that X was going to give it to me, and yes, that is an old meme, and no, I do not care. After using these things known as legs, I was easily able to outmaneuver him and return to the police station, wherein which I grabbed the tool, had another run-in with Fedora Man, and swiftly moved the library shelves to clear myself a pathway to the clock tower. The puzzle was easy enough, and I was able to obtain the second electronic part. With both parts in hand, I could return to Chief Irons' office and receive the parking lot keycard. Sherry's segment was, well, Sherry's segment, and it was over rather quickly considering there is no combat in this part of the game. Birkin gives the Rule 34 Redditors a field day when he gets frisky with Chief Irons, and after that it was back to playing Claire. After putting in the keycard, I had myself another run-in with the reincarnation of Oswald Mosley. You know, just without the epic mustache, and before I knew it I found myself in the rainy streets. This part was pretty simple. All I had to do was just bait the zombies and then do a quick ring around the road to get back to the stairs safely. Made all the more tense by having Captain Trenchcoat on my bum as well. But now it was time for the dogs. Thank God this wasn't a no damage run, as no matter how many times I run through this section, I constantly keep getting cucked by the RNG. But it seemed that luck was on my side and I made it to the orphanage safely. As I entered the orphanage, I walked down a corridor and it was made clear that Capcom had decided to rip off Alien. Once I found Sherry, I was met with a loud thud, what seemed to be like an earthquake, although I knew it was just Mr. X. And honestly, at this point during the playthrough, I was thinking to myself that an earthquake would probably be more threatening to me, because so far, this run has seemed to be quite the cakewalk. Oh, just you wait for G3. Anyways, I entered the elevator and then William began chopping away, slicing and dicing at Mr. X's flesh. William, I know he's a snack and all, but you don't have to take it that far. After plummeting down to the depths of hell, which is rather fitting as this is another goddamn sewer level, I was met with Annette, who seemed rather intent on stopping William at all costs. Being the kind person that I am, I decided to ignore her and then came to the conclusion that I'd have more fun trekking through a disgusting sewer. And after another quick stop at the box, I began my search for the chest plugs. There was a slight occupational error, but I could get the first plug easy enough. I went back down the elevator and then braced myself for what I knew was probably the most frustrating part of the whole game in general. Even without the challenge, this section is a pain. Thankfully Claire had laid off the muffins before starting this challenge, and I was thin enough to squeeze past the enemies without having to engage in a fight. I swiftly exited the water and was able to grab the last 2 spark plugs that I needed. I used my 500 IQ brain to figure out the puzzle, and then I prepared myself for the G2 fight. I was able to dodge his hands from the ceiling easy enough, but I knew up next was the real fight. I quickly squeezed past G2 and then began my run down to the battle arena. As he began to get closer, I prayed that I had enough knives to complete the fight so I wouldn't have to start this challenge all over again. I pressed the button, bagged myself a 4th knife, and then began the fight. I began hacking away immediately, although after tanking 2 shots and taking a considerable amount of damage, I realised that this probably wasn't a very good idea. I made a quick dash to the other end of the arena, and after perfectly dodging one of his lunge attacks, I was able to start hacking away at the eyeball that remained on his shoulder. After lots of trial and error, I found that doing loops around him was the most efficient way to kill him, and so I could finally begin proper.
I got a surprise for you. Alright, time for an encore.
Oh yeah, I'm supposed to be rescuing a kid! I grabbed Sherry and then began my trek down to the Umbrella Laboratory. I stole her ID wristband and I was good to go. I began my exploration of the lab, and I won't lie when I say the parts later on with the Ivy were a real pain. There isn't really too much to talk about in this section, as most of the time I just stuck to my tried and true method of kiting all the enemies as opposed to actually fighting them, although I won't lie when I say I did die quite a few times, and this area definitely wasn't easy to clear, especially having to run back and forth past these 2 goddamn lickers. I combined what was remaining of my 3 brain cells after dying to those Ivy about 100 times from their BS one-shot attacks, and I was able to complete the fluid puzzle. I put the fluid into a cooling station so I could finally put an end to that damned plant. I grabbed the upgraded wristband chip and then went and prepared myself for what I knew was going to be the G3 fight. Now, remember how earlier I said that this run was a cakewalk? Well, I immediately retract my previous statement. You see, to call this boss the bane of my existence is honestly putting it lightly, because I swear I could not get this fight down for the life of me. I must have died at least 15 times before finally putting an end to him, and I absolutely sucked at dodging his attacks. On more than one occasion I ended up running out of heals, and in the later phases it got to the point where I could barely even attack him, and I just had to do one singular hit and watch his temper tantrum in the distance, praying that I had enough knives to finish the fight. After taking a day's break, I finally began to get the hang of the fight, and although the final kill itself wasn't really that perfect, it was still a victory nonetheless. I ran back to Sherry, and after watching Annette die, lol, we began our escape from the laboratory. Only one boss remained, and then I could finally say I'd completed Resident Evil 2 using only a knife. But then, disaster struck. You see, I didn't actually have enough knives to fully complete the fight and kill the final boss. It was literally impossible. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably sitting there going, well, why don't you just lower the difficulty when prompted? And yes, I did try and lower the difficulty to casual, and even then I didn't have enough knives to finish it. As ashamed as I am to say it, I ended up using only 200 bullets of the minigun just to shave off some of his health and then finally get the killing blow with the knife. So yeah, technically not knife only, but there was nothing I could do about that. Although may I add that most of the damage did actually come from the knife, so come on, don't murder me please. And with that rather tragic end, the challenge had finally come to a close. So, can you beat the Resident Evil 2 remake using only knives? Well, theoretically yes, you can. You see, beforehand I decided to be an idiot and not actually do any research for the knife locations and just decided to go full balls winging it when I did the challenge, and so there probably were knives that I missed, and it probably is possible to complete it with a limited amount of knives. And what's the moral of this story, children? Well, it's quite simple. Don't be like me and be an idiot. And if you can manage that, then maybe you can manage to complete RE2 Remake without using a knife. Also, just a quick side note, but whilst editing this video, FromSoft actually released the trailer for Elden Ring, and the cult of Miyazaki shall rise again. But that's enough fanboying from me, and I will see you chads later.